What's up, ladies? I'm sorry I'm a little late on today's Wednesday Wellness. It's just so many things happening right now, and this particular Wednesday, it's actually a little bit special for me because the reason why I'm late is because I actually stayed a little bit longer doing a practice in a school that I go to, and the practice that we did today has to do with mentalization. And it involves different things, but what I like about it the most and why I actually take the time to stay and to practice it is because it's a group that gets together, and we all, with our own energies and with our own intentions, mentalize things that we want to happen for us and also for all of us as a group. So for me, it's something that I try to apply in my life whenever I'm working towards a goal. Hey, Amanda, welcome. Thank you for watching. So this is something that I try to apply in my life whenever I'm working towards a goal. It's to mentalize what the future outcome will be, and also to mentalize what it would actually make me, what would that look like, whatever that is. And so as a group today, on usually 2 Wednesdays a month, we do it as a group, and I think it makes it a little bit more powerful. Okay, so we are here to talk a little bit about gluten, and it's actually one of my favorite topics because there's a lot of controversial around this topic around there, and I usually get the question from clients and just from a lot of people, like, is it gluten a real problem? And so we're going to talk about 5 things today. First of all, what is it, and how does it actually affect our digestive system? The second thing, it's how can we actually know if we have any kind of gluten sensitivity? The third thing is, why is it gluten such a big deal today, and why wasn't it such a big deal in the past? Fourth thing is, where do you find gluten? And then the last thing that I want to talk to you guys about is, how do you actually diagnose yourself and figure it out whether this is something that is actually bothering you or not. And so first, let's talk a little bit about gluten and what the issues around gluten we're having today. And so first of all, I want to remind you that where most of the absorption of the nutrients, about 90% of the absorption of the nutrients, occur in your small intestine. And your small intestine is connecting your stomach with your large intestine. And so I want you to put your hand in your belly button. Right there, where your palm is and your belly button, right there is where your small intestine is. And so it's usually what happens when clients tell me, oh, I'm feeling bloated, and I tell them where exactly. It's usually in your belly button, and that's not your stomach, that's your small intestine. And that could be a sign of gluten sensitivity. And so let's talk a little bit of what actually happens and what's the problem with gluten. So once the food goes into the small intestine, the inner parts of the small intestine are like a rug. And I actually wanted to show you my rug here in my apartment so that you can get a feeling of what your small intestine looks like. So if you look at the rug, you see that you have like little shags in the rug, and that's how the inside part of your intestine looks like. Now, if the rug is new, all of the shags are gonna be like this and all together, right? So they're gonna look very nice all together, no problem at all. Now, if these shags that I call them are called villi inside your small intestine, and when they're actually damaged, when they have been damaged because of the foods that we're having, the stress that we carry, they actually tend to flatten. They tend to flatten, and there's a space between all the little villis that should be together like this. So again, the rug, when it's nice, should be like this all together. But when there is a problem and your small intestine gets inflamed, and then they get flattened, and then it creates spaces in between them. And what happens is, once you eat a food that contains gluten, usually the food that contains gluten actually, the problem with gluten is that it's making your stomach create this protein that is actually getting into the spaces in between the villi and going into your bloodstream. So when your villi or the inside of your small intestine are not all together compressed and working properly, they're like this. You see how there is space? The protein caused by eating some gluten actually gets inside into your bloodstream. And when they go into your bloodstream, essentially your immune system says, hey, what's going on? This is not supposed to be here. And then it starts attacking, your immune system starts attacking yourself. And so that's when we get the problem with gluten. That's the correlation between gluten and autoimmune diseases. So what can we do to actually first of all try to get the villi together again so that they all look very nice, very properly, and we prevent some of the protein to go into our bloodstream? It can be repaired, but we need to go into a pretty intense eating behavior and eating program that it can actually help you rebuild those villi and actually allow the small intestine to absorb the right amount of nutrients. The other problem with having the villi being not exactly in the right place is that when the cells are not together, you're actually not absorbing the nutrients that you're supposed to be absorbing. So whenever there is a problem with gluten sensitivity, the protein is not only getting into your bloodstream, but you're also being malnourished because the small intestine is not able to absorb all the nutrients that go into your small intestine. I'm going to stop here and ask Amanda if you have any questions, or is it clear so far the process and how come the actual gluten it's a problem, and why does it triggers the autoimmune system? Okay, no questions so far. Okay, so where do we actually find gluten nowadays, and why is it a problem nowadays and not in the past? So in the past, first of all, you can find gluten in wheat. That's the most common source of gluten. And okay, awesome. So good. Amanda says I have never heard this, so I'm interested in hearing more. Awesome. Okay, so I'll keep with my story here. Okay, so you can find gluten. Where is it mostly? You can find them in wheat. And what is the problem with wheat now? In the past, back in the day, we used to have soils that were filled with nutrients. That it was filled. They were essentially not as damaged or as used or as full with pesticides and everything that we're using nowadays. So before, it was a pretty virgin land. Nowadays, with all the pesticides and everything that's happening in the land where we're actually growing wheat, it's kind of like being modifying the wheat that we consume, and so our organism is not necessarily ready to digest this type of wheat. So again, given the fact that it has been a different process from when we started growing wheat years and years ago, where the land and the process wasn't as interrupted as it is today, and nowadays, with the fact that we add pesticides, we genetically modify our food, all that stuff has created this type of wheat that is actually causing the small intestine to produce this protein that's going into our blood system, and that's where the problem comes from. So that's the difference between the gluten in the past, and that's the difference between the gluten now. And why is it such a big deal now? Is because just our current diets, right, with a lot of sugar, a lot of processed foods, not many fiber, not many veggies, all of that stuff have already caused some inflammation in the small intestine, and the fact that we're adding gluten is just actually bringing everything together and it's making it even worse. And that's why we're seeing so many problems with gluten nowadays. How can you know if you're allergic to gluten? You can either get a blood test with your doctor and test to see if you have a celiac disease. If you're diagnosed with celiac disease, that's one way. And the other way also is to try yourself, right? See if you feel any symptoms after you eat wheat, right? So for instance, or gluten. Now, you can find gluten in other places, hidden gluten, but the most common one will be in, let's say, bread, pastas, cookies, obviously, anything that has wheat. And it's mostly most of the flours. Prima, hi, Marielcita. I made it to the Facebook Live, a little late, but I made it. And I'm happy that I saw you today. Okay, so going back to diagnosing yourself. If you eat pasta, if you eat bread, and then you start feeling inflamed, let's say 2 or 3 hours after, that's one of the symptoms that you might have gluten sensitivity. Also, the test for celiac disease might come back negative, but you might have sensitivity that is not necessarily reflected in the test. So you have to really pay attention to the symptoms that you might feel. Some people also start feeling nausea, some people feel diarrhea, some people feel really, really bad stomach pains. So it can be manifested in many things. What I would say, and this is what I recommend to clients, is to really try to cut it 100% for, let's say, a week. Just try to be gluten-free for, let's say, a week and see how you feel. If you feel less inflamed, if you stop feeling symptoms such as nausea, such as being bloated, pain in your stomach, if those symptoms disappear, then it actually means that you have some kind of gluten sensitivity. So with that, I think I touched on the 5 things that I wanted to talk about gluten today. The reality is that most people nowadays have some kind of gluten sensitivity. And by removing it actually, that's when you actually realize, oh my God, that is so true. I feel so much better now. So my thing is, it is really hard to be 100% gluten-free. However, the more you try, the more you realize that there are options out there. For those of you that have diagnosed with leaky gut, celiac disease, IBS, Crohn's disease, you know that is a no-no for you to eat gluten. For both of us that haven't been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease like that, we have the ability to continue to enjoy gluten. However, it is our job to protect our small intestine and make sure that those villi are in a good place so that we don't develop any kind of sensitivity to gluten. So with that, I think that's all I wanted to cover today. I will be posting eventually this week a document where you can see some of the hidden sources of gluten, because it's not as plain vanilla as just avoiding wheat. We can also have them in some grains, like, so for instance, some oats from your oatmeal have gluten as well. So I will be posting that for those of you that are interested. I see that Maddie joined. Maddie, hi, good night. Good evening to you. I'm happy that you joined. In fact, you're one of the persons that I know that avoids gluten 100%. So I know it's a little late, but you probably can relate to this topic and everything that I talked about, and the fact that we have to try to back it up and see how we feel in regards to gluten. But nowadays, most people have some kind of sensitivity to gluten. And again, if you're feeling inflamed in your stomach, specifically behind your belly button, that means that there is some kind of inflammation within your small intestine, and it can be related to gluten. Hi, I see that Judith just joined. Welcome. I'm almost finishing my conversation here about gluten, but if you guys have any questions, you want to type it. I have time to kind of like answer some of the questions. I talked about the problem with gluten. I talked about why is it important now and not in the past? Why is it a big deal now? I talked about how can you diagnose yourself. And I talked about some of the hidden places where you can find gluten. Let me see if there's anything else that I wanted to cover today. Yeah, so the other question that I get is how can it be, if it can be diagnosed, you can eliminate it completely and see if you feel better. And if you do, then you definitely have some sensitivity. And the other one is to ask your doctor for a celiac disease test. No, that can be negative, and it doesn't mean that you are not going to have, that you're probably not diagnosed with celiac disease, but it can still mean that you have some sensitivity to gluten. What else? Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So I'm going to be posting some of the hidden sources of gluten. And with that, please stay in touch. Let me know if there's anything else that you guys want to talk about, if you have any questions. I'm super happy to be in this group with you, sharing some of the knowledge and some of the actual, I would say, some of the cases where some of my clients have been able to feel a little bit better just by eliminating gluten. And I had a client before that just by eliminating gluten, she already was able to feel way better, specifically after eating, she stopped feeling bloating, and we realized that she was actually allergic to gluten. And also this client as well, her sister was diagnosed with celiac disease. So it also has to do with the genes as well. So if you have somebody in your family that has some kind of sensitivity to gluten, that might be a hint for you to check it out and to again test it. You can test yourself. You don't need a doctor necessarily to see if you have some kind of gluten sensitivity. All right, so with that, good night, guys. And if you know anybody that might benefit from this group, please share the link with them. I will be more than happy to welcome them into the group. Have a good night. Bye.